Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by poets and writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed. And today I'm so delighted to have Vanessa Hua back on the program. And let me tell you a little bit about Vanessa. She has an enhanced bio since she's last been on the program, which was very early on when the podcast first started. So she's the author of the national bestsellers, A River of Stars and Forbidden City, as well as the story collection Deceit and Other Possibilities, a New York Times editor's pick. A National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, she has also received a Rona Jaff Foundation Writers Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, a California Arts Council Fellowship, and a Steinbeck Fellowship in Creative Writing, as well as honors from the DeGroote Foundation, the Society of Professional Journalists, and the Asian American Journalists Association, among others. Previously, she was an award-winning columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. She teaches at the Warren Wilson MFA program, Sewanee Writers Conference, and elsewhere. Her novel, Coyoteland, and her book of narrative nonfiction, Uprooted, are forthcoming. Welcome back, Vanessa.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's such a pleasure, and we've known each other quite a while. When I was chair of the ASJ conference back in 2017, I asked you to be a keynote, and you graciously agreed, and you talked about setting in writing based on your background as a journalist, and setting is very important in this novel. So we'll talk about that. And then later I moderated a panel for the AWP in Seattle a couple of years, 3 years ago. And you were on that wonderful panel talking about metaphor and using literary terms in writing. So you have such a breadth of experience, and now that's all combined to write your latest, Coyoteland. So first of all, let's talk about how it started, because the pandemic is a big theme running throughout, as well as setting and so much more. So why don't you start with that and what the novel is actually about?
Sure. I started writing it in the spring of 2021, which was really an interesting point in time for the country and the world, because we were lurching our way out of the lockdown days of pandemic. There'd been the national reckoning on race the summer before, and there was also wildfires up and down the West Coast. It felt like a hinge point. Were we going to go back to the way we were? Was we were going to forge a way ahead that was better, or was the pendulum going to swing back to even worse? And standing where we are in 2026, we can see things, how they unfolded. But I like to say the novel is about wealth, privilege, and the housing market, as well as territory, predator, and prey. And I think the inciting image for me came about, I was out on a walk during pandemic lockdown, and I heard what sounded like high heels. If you've ever heard deer on asphalt, it It sounds like the clatter of high heels. And I turned and I couldn't believe my eyes. A coyote was running towards me, being chased by two deer. And then they ran past me and then jumped into the brush. And I live in the hills east of San Francisco. And so it just seemed like a sign of the way a lot of things felt topsy-turvy. So I explore in the book, I think, that question that was coming about in 2021. How can we live despite differences in race and class and ethnicity? How do we be good neighbors to each other? I think that was kind of an overriding question of the book.
And in this book, you have so many characters. You have more characters than you've had before in any of your books. And you also made the coyote point of view, I guess, Wiley. I mean, we get a lot about Wiley, which is fascinating to me. How did you, A, make the decision to have so many characters, and how did you decide to delineate them? Because I think they each have their own challenges, and I'm sure that was important in how you crafted it. And also, why did you decide to make the creative choice to have Wiley have a POV as well?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to inhabit an animal's point of view in ways that were not hopefully sentimental. I didn't want to anthropomorphize him. He is his coyote self, let's say. I felt very much Coyoteland was a story of a community. And that's why there's 4 families, 1 white, 1 black, 1 Latino, 1 Chinese American. And they, vary in experience, race, class. And despite all the, there are conflicts, yet despite all that, they want what's best for their family. They want a better future. And granted, some of the characters make questionable decisions. But what I've always tried to do in my journalism and my fiction is to examine that context, those larger forces, socioeconomic, historical, that are shaping these characters and this place. And there's also an omniscient point of view that joins in from time to time, commenting on what the characters they themselves are only dimly aware of or are unable to see. And you work on things that scare you, right? That because you wonder, can I pull this off? And I was excited, with each book, I always push myself to try something that I haven't attempted before.
And working with the omniscient point of view, what were the challenges of that, and what was the kind of joy of it as well?
I mean, it's intoxicating almost to be able to know everything about everyone, to understand the future, to know their past. But at the same time, there are some omniscient narrators that can be almost a bit judgy. And that's not to say that there shouldn't be a sensibility or a sense of personality to the omniscient narrator, but depending on some of the classics, they very much are more judgy, for want of a better word. And I mean, it's a balancing act because you don't want to tell readers like, this is what you should think, but, let the reader come to their own conclusions. But on the other hand, there is something, again, very delightful to have an omniscient narrator who is taking everything in, who does the past, present, and future.
Fascinating. And in terms of the challenges, like I kind of made little notes throughout. I said the challenge of this one and, friends and potential bullying and, eating disorder, all sorts of things are thrown in there, and as well as technology. And the interspersing of the neighbors and the kids in school, and just everyone is connected or becomes connected in some way. It's almost like a puzzle that you were putting together, and it got more and more propulsive as it went on. And you did something that, and I'm not going to give it all away, but you did something that they say to do with writing novels, which is throw more and more challenges at the protagonists or the main characters. And as I read something and I said, oh, I hope they're okay. And it looks like they're okay. And then there's something else happening. and you're using a lot of setting in your story. I think that's your background of observation as a journalist, really knowing and looking at what you can do with the environment. Can you talk about how you decided to work the setting in and why it's almost like another character in, but woven in very well?
Yes, great observation. That was definitely something I was working towards. Just the land we stand on, there's such a history. It's stolen in successive waves, right? And it's always been contested, from the time it was taken from indigenous to today, when there's protests against the building of below market and affordable housing, like again and again, the battle between who got there earlier and that with the newcomers and what shape a community will take. And so I think setting is a reflection also of how the character views it, right? And that will be reflected in how the description comes out. So say for Tasha, who's African-American teenager who has felt like an outsider during the pandemic, because nature is available steps away, it was healing in a sense. She found herself at home in a way among the plants and trees that she hadn't had until then. So for Jin Chang, he has a house flipping scheme, and it represents, he's had struggles with work, but yet coming to this community, making it here represents something to him. And that's what drives him to, in his desperation to commit ever more escalating. He sees it as a solution, but it just ends up in more trouble. So I think in every way, setting is its own character, but it's also a way of helping to characterize the characters. The way they see and interact with the environment is a reflection. It's just another way you can shade in their character as well.
So fascinating. And family is so important because Jin and Kai and their family is so integral to the action. And Sam and Blair and their family is so integral, and how that all intersperses. And so family is what makes up community. But there are just so many different characters. Was there any one character that you related most to and you thought, oh, this is most like me?
That's often a question I get. Who's your favorite character, or which character is most like you? But in a sense, they're all me because they all came from my imagination. And it's not behavior that I would condone or do myself, but I imagine the what if, or what is the worst case scenario, or what can people, with even those with the best intentions, might feel driven to do. I really enjoyed being able to explore it on that level. But I don't even think by biography or details, like there's no one that I would say, oh, that's me secretly. I think with fiction, you get to say they all come from my imagination. They all represent my thinking over several years about all these issues. The question of housing and wealth and privilege, these are communities happening in communities all over the country.
There's so many of those societal elements, but Tasha is a forager. And your upcoming book, Uprooted, is about foraging. And so it's very interesting how everything reflects back to some things that the characters are doing that are trying to help the family. All their choices are to help the family. So I was reading and I was thinking, who's the villain? Who's the villain? There really are no villains. It's really, like you said before, bad choices.
This is a question I've thought of even with my last book, which was about Chairman Mao's teenage lover, right? And how the question of how to depict him.
He was more of a villain.
Yeah. But even you kind of understood the conditions that formed him, right? And so I think that's, again, something in my journalism and my fiction that I've tried to do, is to really shine a light onto understanding what created this person, how they might act in this situation, and how they find a way through. To consider the larger forces without being didactic. I was actually talking to someone the other day who said that she just found this novel had a lot of empathy, because think about how hard it's been for so many people in these past few years. And you just never know what someone is going through. And with a novel, that's an opportunity to consider that. All those surface interactions, you're wondering, you're questioning, but then going back to thinking like, well, they're going through something that I don't know. And hopefully this novel can help open conversations, right? With readers who are witnessing things in their communities or in their families that have been very difficult, but have been hard to talk about.
Yeah, and in some ways, and it's very different, but Your Friends and Neighbors comes to mind, the TV show, because it is this community and they're all interrelated and everyone has secrets and everyone has things that they want to keep hidden because it impacts their sense of self if people were to know what they're doing or how they're acting. But yet everyone is doing it to help their family in some odd way.
Yes, definitely. Well, and also I would add to that family chosen and received, not just family of blood, but the allies, the mutual aid, that the friendship that springs up between Tasha
And Jane?
Yeah, and Jane, and then the way they work to help Anna, the nanny housekeeper. There are ways in which we can reach across our differences. I mean, I think that's also the hope, that people will find that there is hope at the end of the novel.
I feel like you used a lot of devices to help move the plot along. So the Save El Nido, the orb. So how did you come up with that, and how did you write this novel?
Yeah, people often ask, like, do you outline, or
Are you a pantser or a plotter, right?
Exactly. I am a pantser, but I outline after the first draft. And that's when I write things out scene by scene, who the characters are, the setting, and the sort of a key question I ask in every scene: what's at stake? So even though, and this is something I talk about with my students, even though something might seem like, wow, they're arguing or some dramatic action is happening, if it's not tied to the character's central stake, then people might say of a piece like, oh, this section feels like it's dragging or the pace seems slow. But often it's not a pacing issue, it's a lack of stakes issue. So I had a friend in a writing group and he was talking about something I was working on, and of the character, he said, can't you cut him a break? And I said, no. Geraldine Brooks, in her memoir Memorial Days, talks about some writing advice she heard, which is, your job as a novelist is your character swimming towards shore and you just keep pushing their head down. And they pop up and then keep swimming and you push their head down again. And it sounds sadistic maybe, but I think on the other hand, it's true. I think in early drafts, often because we love the characters, because they sprang from our imagination, we pull a punch. We don't let it get as hard as it can be for them. And so that's what happens in each revision again. And then that creating that sense of escalation, that what is the thing they would hate most, push them into that situation.
And then you have to resolve it at the end, which you do, which is, it's just such an exercise in craft. And this podcast, I'm very focused on craft because I think that's the one thing that helps writers grow. And as a writing teacher, I know you feel the same way. If somebody is trying to write a novel themselves, what do you think would help them the most?
To take books that you would admire, maybe start with a short story, like in terms of length, and do this idea of reverse engineering it. Like, how many scenes are there? What's happening? How do the stakes escalate in the piece? And then map that onto your own drafts. But I mean, the other thing is to read great fiction, great stories. But I will say this, it doesn't even have to necessarily be about, if you're writing something in historic fiction, it's not like you should only read historic fiction. Once you become obsessed with a project, let's say you think, how are two timelines managed? or it can be set in a totally different era, and that book or movie or what other art form could also help shape your work.
And how do you write two books at the same time? Uprooted is coming soon. So how do you do that?
It's been busy. As I'm preparing for the launch of Coyoteland, I'm in the middle of edits for Uprooted. So
Wow.
I mean, I think it's good to have more than one project going at a time. And there are periods in which your book is handed off to early readers or to your agent or to an editor. And so you have other things that you're working on. I mean, I've always loved being able to write across different genres. And I've actually heard people say that it's good to have two projects because it's good for writer's block, because you're always wanting to work on the project that you're not supposed to be working on. So
That's a good point. Are these characters staying with you? Are they grabbing on and you want to do more with them, or is this it for them?
I have a next project, that totally different set of characters, era. But I think it's the same as with all of my novels, because people have asked, like, do you want to write a sequel, or where are they now? And at the end of the 350 pages, I have taken the reader and myself on a journey. And at this point, I really wish them well, I guess. But I have fallen in love with other projects. That said, it'll be interesting. You're right. Like, I have a bunch of events coming up, and I'll be immersing myself in the book back again.
And do you feel that writing in this way with a lot of characters is something you want to continue doing, or is it, again, just depending on the project?
It depends on the project. For my next novel, I am debating that now. So the point of view, the way it'll be structured, a stage in which is exciting, but terrifying all over again.
And what do you want people to most come away with from having read Coyoteland?
But I hope they feel invited into this world and entertained, that they stay up all night reading. But to think about that idea, like, you just don't know what someone's going through, and to think about the forces at play that shape us. And that's going to be key to forging a way ahead.
I like that. And is there any craft tip you want to share, just in general, for whatever somebody's writing?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. Okay, so one would be to keep the book in your head. I use an app on my phone where it will read the manuscript aloud. So when I'm out walking or commuting or out and about, I can listen to my draft, because otherwise parts of the book can almost develop amnesia, because you're just like so far ahead in another section. But just being able to listen to it, receiving it in a different way than on the screen, I find super helpful. And that kind of ties into something else. I think incorporating movement into your writing practice, whether that's swimming or walking or running, is important, because sometimes the inspiration comes, or often the inspiration comes, when you're away from the screen. That things that have been in the forefront of your mind are working in your subconscious, and you have to be out moving in the world for it to be able to bubble up.
I agree. In Writing That Gets Noticed, I talk about how watching Bravo really helps, because it's always working. It's always in the back of your mind. So absolutely. This has just been so great. It's such a propulsive read. I just wanted to keep going and seeing what happened. And I fell in love with the characters from the different socioeconomic classes, but there's all this universality under it, the love of family, the wanting to do better. And I think that really makes it so relatable for anybody, no matter what stage or phase of life you're in. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Coyoteland, everyone.
Great. What a pleasure.
Follow me at estelleerasmus.com on my website, and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube. for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.